being deposed tomorrow. Among the terms for Hillary Clinton's agreement to comply with this congressional subpoena and participate in the panel's Epstein investigation, she will agree to engage in questions about Epstein and Maxwell's efforts to exploit their connections to powerful figures such as the Clintons to protect themselves from accountability for their alleged sex trafficking crimes, the person said. The oversight panel has also agreed to discuss the government's mishandling of the Epstein case, which began in Florida long after Bill Clinton left office. Notably, the list agreed upon issues does not include unrelated topics that have long been a fixation among Republicans, such as Hillary Clinton's handling of the 2012 Benghazi attack while she was Secretary of State, or her use of a private email server for official communications. She was dogged by both issues as she ran for president in 2016 against Donald Trump. Neither Bill nor Hillary Clinton has been accused of wrongdoing in connection with Epstein. Hillary Clinton has maintained that she has no memory of meeting Epstein, while Bill Clinton has admitted to using Epstein's plane on several occasions, but has maintained he never visited the island. Both have said that they have no knowledge of his crimes. All right, everyone, I do want to now read to you Hillary Clinton's statement. It was just released on her X. I want to bring this here to you. This is the opening statement that she is giving during this deposition. So let me read that to you right now on LiveNOW from Fox. It goes as, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, members of the committee, as a former senator, I have respect for legislative oversight and I expect its exercise, as do the American people, to be principled and fearless in pursuit of truth and accountability. As we all know, however, too often congressional investigations are partisan political theater, which is an abdication of duty and an insult to the American people. The committee justified its subpoena to me based on its assumption that I have information regarding the investigations into the criminal activities of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Let me be as clear as I can. I do not. As I stated in my sworn declaration back on January 13th, I had no idea about their criminal activities. I do not recall ever encountering Mr. Epstein. I never flew on his plane or visited his island, homes, or offices. I have nothing to add to that. Like every decent person, I have been horrified by what we have learned about their crimes. It's unfathomable that Mr. Epstein initially got a slap on the wrist back in 2008, which allowed him to continue his predatory practices for another decade. Mr. Chairman, your investigation is supposed to be assessing the federal government's handling of the investigations and prosecutions of Epstein and his crimes. You subpoenaed 8 law enforcement officials, all of whom ran the Department of Justice or directed the FBI when Epstein's crimes were investigated and prosecuted. Of those 8, only 1 appeared before the committee. 5 of the 6 former attorney generals were allowed to submit brief statements stating they had no information to provide. You have had 0 public hearings, refused to allow the media to attend them, including today, despite espousing the need for transparency on dozens of occasions. You have made little effort to call the people who show up prominently in the Epstein files, and when you did, not a single Republican member showed up for Les Wexner's deposition. It goes on to say, the institutional failure is designed to protect one political party and one political official rather than to seek truth and justice for the victims and survivors, as well as the public who also want to get to the bottom of this matter. My heart breaks for the survivors, and I am furious on their behalf. I've spent my life advocating for women and girls. I have worked hard to stop the terrible abuses so many women and girls face here around the world, including human trafficking, forced labor, and sexual slavery. For too long, these have been largely invisible crimes or not treated as crimes at all, but the survivors are real and they are entitled to better. In Southeast Asia, I met girls as young as 12 years old who were forced into prostitution and raped repeatedly. Some were dying of AIDS. In Eastern Europe, I met mothers who told me that they lost daughters to trafficking and did not know where to turn. In settings around the world, I met survivors trying to rebuild their lives and help rescue others with little support from people in power, who too often turned a blind eye and a cold shoulder. If you are new to this issue, let me tell you, Jeffrey Epstein was a heinous individual, but he's far from alone. This is not a one-off tabloid sensation or a political scandal. It's a global problem with an unimaginable human toll. My work combating sex trafficking goes back to my first days as First Lady. I worked to pass the first federal legislation against trafficking and was proud that my husband signed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which increased support for survivors and gave prosecutors better tools for going after traffickers. As Secretary of State, I appointed a former federal prosecutor to ramp up our global anti-trafficking efforts. I oversaw nearly 170 anti-trafficking programs in 70 nations and directly pressed foreign leaders to crack down on trafficking networks in their countries. Every year, we published a global report to shine a light on abuses. The findings of those reports triggered sanctions on countries failing to make progress, so they became a powerful diplomatic tool to drive concrete action. I insisted that the United States be included in the report for the first time ever back in 2011 because we must hold ourselves not just the same standard as the rest of the world, but to an even higher one. Sex trafficking and modern slavery should have no place in America, none. The Secretary Clinton's opening statement continues, saying the Trump administration gutted the trafficking in persons office at the State Department, cutting more than 70% of the career civil and foreign service experts who worked so hard to prevent trafficking crimes. The annual trafficking report required by law was delayed for months. The message from the Trump administration to the American people and the world could not be clearer. Combating human trafficking is no longer an American priority under the Trump White House. This is a tragedy. It's a scandal. It deserves vigorous investigation and oversight. A committee endeavoring to stopping human trafficking would seek to understand what specific steps are needed to fix a system that allowed Epstein to get away with his crimes back in 2008. A committee run by elected officials with a commitment to transparency would ensure the full release of all the files. It would ensure that the lawful redactions of those files protected the victims and survivors, not powerful men and political allies. It would go and get to the bottom of reports that DOJ withheld FBI interviews in which a survivor accuses President Trump of heinous crimes. It would subpoena anyone who asked on which night there would be the wildest party on Epstein's island. It would demand testimony from prosecutors in Florida and New York about why they gave Epstein a sweetheart deal and chose not to pursue others who may have been implicated. It would demand that Secretary Rubio and Attorney General Bondi testify about why this administration is abandoning survivors and playing into the hands of traffickers. It would seek out officers not on the front lines of the fight and ask them what support they need. It would be put forth legislation to provide more resources and force the administration to act, but that's not happening. Instead, you have compelled me to testify, fully aware that I have no knowledge that would assist you in the investigation in order to distract attention from President Trump's actions and to cover them up despite legitimate calls for answers. If this committee is serious about learning the truth about Epstein's trafficking crimes, it would not rely on press gaggles to get answers from our current president on his involvement. It would ask him directly under oath about the tens of thousands of times he showed up in the Epstein files. If the majority was serious, it would not waste time on fishing expeditions. There is too much that needs to be done. What is being held back, who is being protected, and why the cover-up? My challenge to you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, is the same challenge I put to myself throughout my long service in this nation. How to be worthy of the trust of the American people has given you. They expect statesmanship, not gamesmanship, leading, not grandstanding. They expect you to use your power to get to the truth and to do more to help survivors of Epstein's crimes, as well as the millions more who are victims of sex trafficking. Again, that was the 4-page Secretary Clinton's opening statement that she just read to the committee just moments ago. And again, we are waiting for more key updates coming from inside this area where this deposition is now underway. Of course, we'll always be bringing you these updates all here on Live Now from Fox. I do now want to showcase to you House Democrats just moments ago speaking to the media, and we're going to bring that to you right here on Live Now from Fox.